Hi, this is Eric Durek, and welcome to MedHealthFit.com, the TV show that integrates wellness and healthcare. And tonight, I'd like to introduce you to a special guest, Prisco Panza from Santa Barbara. He is the director of the Lifestyle Consulting Service here in town, and he has a very unique take on all things exercise, wellness, nutrition, and counseling. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
All right,
Great
so,
to be here.
and we don't know each other that well. You've been in town not that long.
5 months.
But you've made sort of an impact already. So what I want, my first question is I want you to tell myself and the audience, what is it that you do? I mean, you know, kind of how you got started in the health and fitness business, where have your travels taken you? And then sort of the third part of that question is, how did you wind up in Santa Barbara?
So started off in New York, working with clients, and my business sort of evolved into what I do, which is more of a stretching healing modality, because a lot of my clients and what I noticed in the gyms were people just not functioning to their full capacity, canceling appointments, not showing up, not coming to the gym, not using their memberships. And I just, like, you know, as an athletic trainer, I get fed up. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, this is just crazy. These people want to have a lifestyle and they can't have it.
Right.
So I took a few of my private clients and I said to them, hey, listen, you know what? Let's just take a half hour of your session and just stretch you and see what happens. And results were amazing. Mm-hmm. You know, as far as people bouncing back from injuries or things that were bothering them and so on and so forth. And I just started putting the pieces together and integrating it into all of my routines with all my clients.
Okay. And so from New York, you went to?
I was lucky enough to land in Myrtle Beach for 4 months or so and work with some professional golfers and some great guys down there and did that. And then I was off to Seattle shortly after that for a couple of years. And I was located in a mixed martial arts studio, Ivan Salaverry MMA. Great guy, great group of guys. Mm-hmm. You know, some heavy duty fighters there. And I was introduced to, you know, a different breed of person, a different breed of athlete there that really beats up their body pretty bad.
Crazy boys.
So yeah, and you know, I got some interesting experiences handed to me there, and it was a great experience. And then, you know, I came to Santa Barbara.
Yeah, and you know, mixed martial arts is an interesting sport because it's about as hardcore as you can get. You know, my wife would always say to me, she'd watch a television show and some guy would get kicked in the chest. And he'd get back up and he'd start fighting, and she goes, "Oh, that's just not real." You know, if somebody kicked me in the chest, I'd be on the ground for a whole day.
So true.
And I would say to her, "Well, darling, you should pretty much watch a mixed martial arts thing on TV because these guys take, you know, spin kicks and kicks to the head." And I mean, it's amazing the stuff that they come back with. So from Seattle, you came to Santa Barbara. You've been here for 5 months, and what was the impetus outside of, you know, palm trees and warm weather?
It was a draw here when I came to visit in July. You know, I always wanted to be in California. I love the environment, the people. You know, it's a great place to live and a great place to be. And if I could be anywhere in the world, why wouldn't I, you know, do my magic here, so to speak?
Okay. So your magic is this brand of movement therapy. And I've seen, and we were talking a little bit about this before the show, I see a sort of bifurcation in the fitness industry now, is that you have work that you're doing. It's specific, it's functional, it's age-related or non-use related, like, you know, I haven't been to the gym in 20 years, and so you're going to get balanced and fixed, and, you know, little dash of Rolfing and a little dash of the Alexander technique and all these things sort of, which is a good thing because, you know, the Alexander technique was good for its time, but he didn't really know that much about, same with Pilates, and now about fitness. Well, now you got people that are integrating all of these kind of things. So you have this unique stretching program, and what makes it different than something like Pilates? What makes it different than an advanced yoga class or some of the other stretching types of modalities that are already here in Santa Barbara?
I think the thing that separates it from all other things is the fact that it's a passive stretch protocol. It's not using a dynamic stretch or a static stretch or a PNF. Not that I don't utilize those, because I do, but in this case, the passive stretch allows the body to relax and open fully. And in that opening and that fully is where the healing really begins.
Okay. So you're doing most of the work as the trainer / facilitator.
I'm doing all the work.
You're doing all the
Yeah,
work. Okay.
That's
Which is interesting because I want to tell you, my first job in New York City was at the Sports Training Institute, and we had movement therapists who worked alongside the personal trainers, and these people were mostly trained in dance. And when I first started there, I had a preconceived notion, it's a bunch of dancers and they walk funny and the guys are all skinny, they don't,
Right.
But as I got to know them and watched what they did with their clients, they were the ones who did a little dash of the Alexander technique and a little dash of, ballet, whatever, and they put all of these things together, and a few of them were actually martial artists as well, and I started to see
the pieces come
together from these folks, and now I pretty much do what they do because I see the benefits, and I see as we get older. I spent a lot of time stretching in high school, so when I got to college and ran track, I was good to go. Fast forward 35 years, not so much. It's really hard for me to get up and going, and I actually do stretching programs at my day job, but I don't do them at the level that I need to do to really help my function. So you have this program, it's passive, you're doing the work and you're really seeing the benefits. But one of the things that I really gleaned from working with you a few times is that you bring other specialties to that soup. And one of them is a lifestyle consulting, which is the name of your company, but the reason it is that for a reason is that you actually talk people through certain types of issues, mostly functional, mostly fitness related, but sometimes other lifestyle things with the nutrition and whatever. So let's elaborate on that for a little bit.
I think the thing that really separates that is a lot of times when you do this work, especially when I'm working with the lower dantian and the sacrum, you get into emotional releases with people. So there's generally deeper emotional wounds that will come up in issues, and people tend to hold them in different parts of their body, which is why generally people get the injuries or have the injuries or hold the injuries for so long. Mm-hmm. So as we begin to open those pathways up and we begin to work with that nervous system on that passive stretch, the etheric nervous system can then be engaged, if you will, the Chinese meridian system within the body, rather than just the physical nervous system. So there's a huge difference in that proponent. So yes, there's a lot of coaching work that goes in, and for example would be, and I can't mention the name, but we did a session last week with an individual who was having a little trouble connecting his masculine and feminine sides of his body. They were disconnected, so to speak. So we put those pieces together.
I think it was Donald Trump. You can say him. Well, go ahead.
But anyway,
just a little joke there. Anyway, but again, so you've got people that are dealing with sort of life issues.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm, all jokes aside, correct me through the stretching program, like a good chiropractic adjustment or like a good massage or like a good acupuncture treatment, you're starting to bring things up to the surface through this passive range of motion, functional movement technique, correct?
Correct, and which would be no different than any other thing that would bring it up. The issue is I'm skilled to handle now what's coming up so that we can heal the issue and move to the next step of your journey, rather than just have the emotion come up and then, okay, now what do we do?
Right. Well, and again, a lot of trainers are not certified in that, and they don't want to be.
I'm blessed with a toolbox.
Okay, so and that's good, because I do think that, again, before we went on air, when we were talking about sort of this evolution of fitness, which is going to be one of my next questions here, is that I see that trainers are going to need to have a little bit more knowledge and probably certification in areas that they don't think that they need. And one of them might be these issues of lifestyle enhancement, which would have to do with dealing with things that come up. Problems. There's one thing about telling people, you eat too many potato chips. We can maybe deal with that. But there's another thing is that, you had an issue when you were younger, which is maybe traumatic for you.
Right.
I'm not your psychologist, I'm not your doctor, but let's try as best we can to kind of move forward on this, where we're not skirting it, but we're trying to kind of move around part of it without getting into differential diagnoses and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So for your clients, the people that you work with, what's the end point? Do you are you trying to manage their pain? Are you trying to improve their fitness? Are you trying to work with gait balance? In addition to the emotional side, what's, if you had to put all of the pieces together at the end of a 4-week, 8-week, 12-week program, what would it look like?
The most important thing for me is that an individual is an empowered self, so that they can now move forward handling issues for themselves. I mean, my dream is to work with somebody for maybe 3 to 6 months, and then they are good to go. Mm-hmm. They don't need the hand holding. They don't need the...
Which kind of sets you aside from most other personal trainers, which would like to work with people for 25 years.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean that they won't cycle back in, but then you work on a referral basis, and I'm sure if you're good enough, you'll get your referrals. It just, I think that overall, empowering the individual to do their own yoga program, to do their own Pilates program, and to make the connections with the people that I know in town, and set them up with the...
Right. And there's nothing wrong with working with some people have their doctor for 30 years. That is just what they do. Some people have their Pilates person, their massage therapist, 30 years, and there's nothing wrong with that relationship. So I don't want you to think that...
No, absolutely. It works.
Most trainers are a certain way. People in private practice, obviously you need to have a referral system, but you also need to have a type of work that you do that will speak for itself. And again, I was impressed with what you did the first time that you worked with me, because I actually could see, we took a couple pictures and I could feel some things that were just completely out of whack that I didn't know. And give me a typical MO of a client you work with. Age, size.
I mean, well, they range from all different things and different stuff. I mean, I'm always gonna. I stop. The first thing I do is I'll just look at their energy field in their body, to see where they're blocked, what's going on with their field, and the field gives away everything else in the physical body. So, because I can't usually see them, because most of the time they're clothed. Next, and I will look at their gait, I'll look at their feet, and the rest of, whatever I can of the whole skeletal structure that's exposed, and just allow that to unfold the rest of the story, so to speak.
So, what's a typical session for you? 30 minutes up to 9, or did you have a sort of a range of time based on what's wrong with them?
It varies. Most sessions are an hour and a half. They could go a little bit more on a first session. It would depend, on the severity of sometimes if there's an athlete involved, I will actually want to watch the athlete perform, whether it's tennis or golf or mixed martial art. I will take at least 30 minutes to watch this athlete and just see how they move, and that gives away pretty much everything right there. Because they're gonna fade to their strong stuff and avoid their weak stuff. So I'm looking at that and then I look at the body, and the body will mirror exactly what the athlete is doing.
Well, we're going to, in a couple minutes after our last question here, we're gonna go through, with the limited resources we have with my non-exercise apparel, but we'll go through a particular segment and we'll talk about some things as you're going. So my last question is, this global thing about fitness is that you've carved out a segment for yourself in counseling. I'm not going to call it, psychology per se, but there's a psychological component to it. Functional movement, which is different than personal training, because you don't actually have to be in a gym to work with someone.
Right.
You could do some resistance work with them, independent of being in a health club. So in terms of where you think fitness is going, and I said before the program, the functional group and then the sports group, yay or nay? That's based on what you've seen, because you've been around the last few years. You've been in different parts of the country, and you've been able to see different levels of this functional training movement.
I would agree. I would say that has exploded over in recent years, if you will. Past 3 to 5 years, it's really exploded. I think that trainers are going to have to up their game to understand the older population, which is increasing in size, and really how to address them. But I also think trainers are going to find their niches for themselves, and some people will go one way and some people will go another.
Right.
But, and I think that trainers need to stay on, I guess, well up to date on things, because like we were talking about before, AI is just, you can get an app or a program for a trainer, and people are like, oh, I don't need a trainer. I got my iWatch. I'm like,
Yeah, well, yeah.
Really?
And I actually...
How's that a substitute?
Well, interestingly enough, and I'm going to spend about 30 seconds because I do want to get to our next segment, but artificial intelligence is the next big wave.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But the thing is what I see is that most people are going to get caught in this wave. I think they're going to get caught in the undertow, because artificial intelligence is the most complicated element of technology right now for, I'll say, for healthcare. And we've got Watson, we've got like a DXT therapy on the East Coast is now going into all of their therapy programs is artificial intelligence. There's a company up here that's doing AI with golf training and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know of 2 or 3 other companies that are bringing artificial intelligence into their healthcare programs or whatever as well. So it's really going to be moving forward. And interesting, when I was at the technology store out here in Goleta, last year for Christmas, and I wanted to get a Fitbit. The guy looked at me and he said, "You don't want a Fitbit." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because people bring them back after 2 or 3 months." And I said, "Really?" It's like the home exercise gym that people put their clothes on after 6 months.
Yeah.
So again, it's going to be kind of how we use this. But from an old-fashioned standpoint, you're a hands-on practitioner.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a couple-minute break. We're going to get set up here to have Prisco do a couple of his stretches here in the next 10 minutes, and we'll kind of move forward from there. All right. So we'll be back in just a second. Hey, we're back with Prisco Panza, and the second part of our episode tonight is the hands-on movement therapy. So I will be in your hands, Prisco, and you just let me know what I need to do.
Lay down, face up.
Okay.
So Eric has been working with me, so we've already looked at his gait, and we've already looked to see how his feet and his body's been laying out. So typical session, again, I always start with the sacrum, the pelvic region, just because it is sacred ground. It is where life begins and ends, and that's where we generally always start our session. So just relax this leg. So I will look for alignment.
Right, and when we worked together the first time, I basically said, "Oh, that's about it," because I've had some problems with my left hip for quite a few years. And it's interesting how you just favor it, and you just go through the day sitting, standing, helping yourself up on one side. So it's, when it gets pushed, or in this case, pulled into an uncomfortable position, there's some pain in there that I have to just kind of relax through.
Right.
So
that's what we need you to do, just kind of breathe into that space and allow it to open up.
Right, and so you may hold this for a minute or so, right?
Usually at a minimum a minute, sometimes up to 5 and 6 minutes. It depends. That's why it is a bit of a job on some bigger individuals that are not.
But for the purposes of this show, we won't do 5 minutes. So. Because I'd like the audience to sort of see exactly what types of technique things that you use.
So as I just look to see how the body responds, and I feel the tension that's left in the system, in the whole chain itself.
And by chain, you mean kinetic chain?
Yeah. Too much?
Nope, that's good.
Okay. Generally speaking, I'll keep it as far as the stretch goes, 1 being nothing and 10 being all you could take. I keep it in the 5-6 range, especially in the beginning.
Right. The first stretch was probably about a 5-6. This is actually a little bit less, but it's probably because it's been stretched. And I'm trying to relax through the pressure.
Good idea. And again, I'm looking specific in this stretch for alignment. If the hip is going to splay on me, then I change the stretch and how I do it. But as long as the hip doesn't and it stays where it needs to stay, then we can approach it from this this direction.
Do you use any specific type of measurement tools like a goniometer or anything like that, or is is your eyeball so good at this point in your career? Which the same with me.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was in college and my professors would do something, and it's he would eyeball because he's done it 10,000 times.
Right.
So.
I do use things like that a lot of times, and I do take a lot of pictures for people too, because it saves me trying to explain to them what I'm seeing and what they're, they can look at it in one picture and go, oh my God, I didn't realize
Is there an app that has like a plumb line thing, or no? That would be an interesting app to have.
No, but you could take a picture on Snapchat and draw.
That's true. Yeah, but like I say, I saw the pictures that you had when I was face down on the table, and I'm looking at sort of the structure of, my hips to my back, and I'm like, oh man, I mean, because you don't see your back. You go through life looking at yourself in front of the mirror.
So like with this, I'm looking at your internal rotation and your external rotation. Not only are they out of bounds, but you really only have a few degrees of external rotation. So normally I would brace this and block this for this stretch, but I'm not going to get into that today. But I'm looking at every detail.
Right, and again, that because the hip has had injuries in it, it's tender. I like to use the word tender when I'm, when I get to a point where it's painful. So.
Good there?
I'm going to just try to breathe and relax through it.
Good thinking.
And then you will repeat all of the stretches on both sides and look for whatever types of imbalances and pain levels and all that other stuff, right?
It's a series of stretches that I go through several different times, depending, and again, a lot of it is done intuitively. There is a science to it, but I'm listening to what your body is saying, connecting my heart space to yours, and I'm listening in that loop, because I can have an idea in my head based on something that you say, based on something that makes sense from a mechanical standpoint, but all of a sudden I'll get into the position of it, and then it doesn't make any, intuitively I'm getting a totally different hit.
Right.
So I'll take
the science that I'm gleaning from what you're talking about is balance, integrity of joints, fascial connections, tendon connections, et cetera, pain levels. That's all the science of this. But I also know from doing this thousands of times myself that the art of this is that, that you can engage in conversation with your client, but you still know what's happening in both of those hands. You know what I mean? You just know what's happening. You know where the end point is because you've done it thousands of times. And a lot of people just don't get that because everyone now it has to be evidence-based, or this science that said, you have to have the art of this kind of stuff. It really, there isn't a fine art. This is almost this blending between the exercise physiology and the dance.
Yeah, it really is, yeah.
And I think in college when I figured out that high hurdling and dance class were almost exactly the same, is where I was like, hey, and they are. Right. I mean, you look at a hurdler and it is like a work of art to see those guys.
I think the only difference is the dance class has more girls.
Well, I don't know. There's some wonderful girl hurdlers too. I mean, I'm trying to think of the gal that was, she was in multiple Olympics, and she was just an amazing hurdler. And it's just so amazing to watch, pole vaulters. And you watch these guys in the NFL now, they're hurdling over tacklers and stuff. And so they're doing some really interesting stuff. The athleticism is truly an art form. And I think that having you work in that realm is, you blend both of those and you get it right. And, that's where I think that higher level of instruction comes in. So.
Yeah, and intuition. I think that, you just got to follow that when when your play breaks down on the field, it's your intuition that gets you, where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. So you're doing some minor stretches on the toes and the arch of the foot and all that kind of stuff as well too.
Yeah, because as this is a pretty good indicator of what's going on with the whole chain on the body. So I will generally allow.
Are you looking for something specific like plantar fasciitis, or are you just looking for tightness in that.
I'm looking for
plantar.
very specific tensions and very specific responses.
That's a little sore.
Yeah, so right there, I'm on a hot spot, I call it, so to speak. So I can feel right here the tension in the tissue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently move into the tissue, and you'll notice that it'll hurt for maybe 30 seconds, and then it just dissipates. But I'll stay there for a minute or so to allow that signal to move through the body long enough to say, okay, we can release this and move it up the whole chain. Because this here is directly tied to this, which is where the foot is caving sometimes.
Right. Well, in any podiatrist or, you know, person who does reflexology and all that stuff will tell you that you know, it starts with the feet, moves up to, like you say, the sacrum and all of those things.
Right.
And I just think that in, I'll call it modern medicine, a lot of times the very basic things are not tended to. Everything has to be complicated. So it's kind of my take on you know, how things are done with the body. So
and then we would repeat this with the other side, and then I would obviously have the person just, you know, you'd get up, walk around a little bit, let it integrate in. I would get your feedback. I would look at how the body is giving me its feedback. I'd look at the energetic field again, and then we would just, I would continue through this with the, you know, the rest of the series of stretches.
Right, now you started with the hip, moved down to the lower part of the leg, you went to the other side. Do you do the same sort of process through the shoulders or the neck? Or
Yes,
okay.
and that may not get done in the first 2, 3, 4 sessions, depending on the individual or what the injury is. If there's an acute injury on the upper body, then yes. But if not, then I will let the body just kind of unfold itself for me and see where that, you know, how it brings itself into that.
So, you know, a person who's going to watch this is going to see that you're doing some what I'll call gross motor stretches, you know, the large muscles, the hip, quads, you know, the hamstrings, etc. And then you moved into more subtle type of movement type things. And I could sense the energy sort of transference with that. That's, you're sort of bringing that to me as it's not just a stretch. And I want the audience to really know that it's not, you know, you're just not some guy that's stretching them after track and field practice. You're trying to integrate a bunch of things in there, plus the conversation, plus everything else. So it really is, I think, and there are a lot of people in Santa Barbara who are doing stretching programs, and you know, we've got yoga soup, and you know, we've got all kinds of things here. This is, I would say Santa Barbara really is kind of the mecca of all of this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so I think that's why you're going to fit into this community really well. So I hear the music, and we're going to have you back on the show here to do part of the second portion or the third portion of what you're going to do. But for medhealthfit.com, this is Eric Durack. Thank you to Prisco Panza,
Thank you.
our new movement therapist in town, and we'll see you next time on Med Health Fit.